Today I have this beautiful gentleman, Aleksa, next to me. I just bumped into him here at the Staatenlos meetup from Christoph, and we instantly connected as I mentioned that I'm basically into network states, governance 2.0, digital nations, whatever, because I really believe that this is a big necessity that this will happen. It just takes a lot of time, and for this it's really important to identify basically the key people who are then able to act and build the moment the window of opportunity is opening or the moment it's really about to start. Aleksa, first of all, tell me, where are you coming from? Not only physically, but what is your background? What are you doing? Why are you here? And then we go into the topic of network states and alternative governance and sovereignty and so on and so forth.
Certainly. So thanks for having me on the show. I come from a background of primarily special economic zones, so physical areas that have different regulations. And then through traveling in Africa and South America and doing essentially industrial park consulting for a while, and small amounts of legislative consulting, I ran into sort of this circle of people, primarily based around Silicon Valley, that were dissatisfied with the way government functions as a system. And as I'm sure you know, this starts with people going libertarian, going ANCAP, whatever, and then eventually they realize that screaming into the void about how unfair things are doesn't work and you need to start building stuff. And eventually I was able to meet a couple of people who started doing interesting projects like building these online communities that would meet in various physical places and slowly start garnering the type of infrastructure that's necessary for a community to function. So things like payment rails, things like methods of incorporation, so that in this group of people that I was working with, everybody would open their companies the same way.
Yes.
Everybody would open their bank accounts the same way. Of course, with existing jurisdictions. This wouldn't be some new network state type thing. But everybody would do it the same way. And that's sort of a business that I'm in right now, all of this banking incorporation tax stuff. But long term, really what I'm interested in is ensuring that the technology of government is in line with the technology that we've got around today. Because it's frankly ridiculous that banks still have to run their transfer systems on COBOL, the 1970s tech, and same thing for the government. If you go to the airport and they scan your passport, the program that shows up, like the Windows 95 thing that shows up, that's called Aleksa, and that's created by the International Civil Aviation Organization, and they use it to scan passports, and it's just spaghetti code and nobody knows how it works, and people just hope for the best. So that's one thing I want to change during my life. Make sure that the technology of government is lined up with what we've actually got and what can make life better for us.
That's a really interesting input. So I have two thoughts here. The first thought is what Elon Musk did with Doge. We don't want to lose ourselves in the current zeitgeist, but I still think, because he knew about the idea of network states, 100% for sure, because his ex-wife came to a network state meetup. So I'm 100% sure Elon Musk knew about this idea of alternative governance 2.0, more efficient, and I really think he already, took the first step in that direction, opening up the data silos and then use AI in order to find inefficiencies or even corrupt things. This was one thing, and the second thing I forgot. No, but how do you see this turning out? Like, do you think we will establish our own governance and then basically work with the old world? And it's like a hybrid thing, because we cannot we need, for example, access to a territory. And probably countries will exist till we leave this world. I don't see this disappearing. I just see that there's like a meta thing above, and we get access to the territory. Now I remember the second thought. There was a book being written by the founder of BitNation, Susanne. It was called Lucy, and it was about the idea that governance or all of the services and functions, they should be handled by various AI agents. So imagine an army of AI agents who basically takes care of all of the affairs within a society and within a government without having rigid processes being implemented, you know, the old way.
Right.
It's like a, let's say it really cheesy, it's like a loving mother on top who is watching, okay? And when there is a problem, because we cannot think about all of the use cases. This is so complex. Of course, we can issue an ID, we can issue a birth certificate, whatever, you know, this is easy to implement.
But that's merely AI-ifying the previous system, right? It's not actually creating a new system. Sorry, carry on.
I think it would create a new system. For example, when it comes to, you have a community and there are issues popping up, maybe business issues where normally you would end up eventually at the court.
Right.
I think at one point AI could identify this and could try to mediate. So, because we started also, I helped to start Your Justice, which was exactly a platform for governments 2.0. And we wanted to have digital courts, for example.
Right.
And I am not sure how this will turn out later. I have a meetup with the guy who is an expert into AI agents. And for me, I think this is the way forward.
So, I'd mentioned technology and the government catching up, the latter catching up to the former. And I think a way that's useful to think about with regard to this is we start with, you know, a group of humans in a forest, much like this one, and what are the social technologies that they have in place? Well, none really. Everything's in their heads, right? And eventually you come up with something like writing, and when you have writing, then you can come up with basic things like units of account and storage and things like that. So there's one thing which is the actual physical technology of can I, you know, create a clay tablet or something to record things. But then there's also the social technology of are we able to convince everybody to accept recorded tablets as a statement of truth to such an extent that we're actually going to do stuff with it, right? And when we're talking about, I think this is something that a lot of network state people don't really get. When we're talking about network states, we're not merely talking about AI-ifying the existing thing. It's not about turning clay tablets into ones and zeros on an AI agent. It's not about taking all of the existing things. Like, you know, eventually when you go from the primitive situation, eventually everybody needs to have ID cards so that we know we can, so that we know who people are. And that was a social innovation. That was a governance innovation, right? Could we have done that with clay tablets way back in the day? Sure, in a way, probably. You know, if somebody leaves a thumbprint in a clay tablet, whatever. But we didn't think about governance that way back then. And what I'm hearing a lot of from the network state space is we're trying to take all of these archaic solutions, archaic systems, we're trying to take them into the 21st century by AI-ifying them, right? Oh, so you're going to have this 100% digital, zero knowledge proof personal ID card, and then your bank account is going to be as well, you know, completely independent, etc. And all that's great. I think a network state should function in such a way that all of these things like identity and banking and incorporation and dispute resolution, all this other stuff needs to be handled digitally with zero knowledge, with all this stuff we mentioned. But eventually, I think we run into the problem of we need to be innovating way more than we are right now, in that we need to create new social systems. So, for example, I'd like for a network state to offer an alternative, a hybrid type of market, where you're not doing advertising, where you're not doing you're not doing social media content. No offense to what we're doing right now, but where you have a system of communiques and dispatches and messages that people receive directly into their inbox,
Okay.
which tells them what is the stuff that's on offer and what's the stuff that's in demand, so that people know which market pole, which market niche to complete. That's the type of thing. Like if you asked somebody, what's the next thing that a government should figure out, it's how to get capitalism away from this world, from the physical world that surrounds us. I never want to see an ad in my life. All I want is for that stuff to show up in my phone. Probably an AI picks out the best stuff out of it and just asks me, do I want to execute on these things? So that's, I think, a long-winded way to say that we can't just keep going with digitalization and crypto, Web3, whatever you want to call it. Doing that to the existing systems, we actually have to come up with new systems.
Okay, just recently, like 2 days ago, Safety Wings, which is an insurance company from Switzerland, they announced basically on the 6th of July they want to launch the first prototype towards digital nation. And they start with a product, with a service. It's like an insurance product, which is $400 in a month, which gives you medical coverage in terms of you have no income temporarily, they cover that. And doing so, by providing an actual service, they gather a tribe.
I see.
Once that tribe builds more value, more trust, more substance, then they want to go into the direction of, okay, how do we pull this off now?
Right on.
So what do you think is the first service, or potentially the strongest, where people would join a network state, what they don't find in the old world? What do you think would it be? What would even convince your family relative, who is not into that topic, wow, what is this? I want to be part of that. What would that be?
I think for a lot of people, doing business is very intimidating. I don't know. I'm speaking as this person. I don't know how to advertise. I don't know how to incorporate a business. I don't know how to do the contracts. I don't know how to do all this stuff. And if we were to find a way to do trustless business, combining with the thing that I just mentioned about trustless marketing, the amount of entrepreneurship and the amount of wealth that people would directly gain from that, I think is outsized compared to how easy it is to implement. So if you ask me, it's probably handling just basic ease of doing business items. So incorporation, dispute resolution, insurance, contracts.
Okay.
That would be my preference. Like, I don't need a national ID system. I don't need banking. I don't need the everything now. Right? Just figure out the company formation thing first, and see how it goes from there. Because when you get company formation, you get a massive economic engine that subsidizes everything else.
I am personally thinking about a special economic zone for digital nomads, which would go into this direction, like Estonia did, but on steroids, so to say. And also what you just said, like, I'm from Germany, and what this gentleman mentioned, there are a lot of strings attached when you start a company in Germany. It's not an easy thing. A lot of people are afraid, and probably on purpose. It's really hard, there are a lot of consequences. And it keeps people away from starting their own business and being an entrepreneur. An entrepreneur doesn't mean you are necessarily a businessman. This is human nature. You put a potato in the soil and then you have 10. You create value. And I think we should go back into that mode and empower people. So yeah. And then we compare this with Malta, where you can start a company and it's still a proper country, a proper jurisdiction is being recognized, but there are not that many strings attached to it. Everyone who comes there is a businessman. You don't even need to open a business. You get your tax number. Let's go.
Right.
Let's do business. And I think if we could also enable this, let's talk about the African continent. If we could look at them and how many people are there, and I think this century is now their time, or like whatever, India.
Right.
But they don't have access to the Western world, so to say. They cannot even start a limited,
Right.
It costs a lot of money. And I think if we would have this digital jurisdiction, which is at the same time safe, immutable, transparent, where no corruption can happen, and I think this would be really, really empowering for them.
And I think you're hitting the nail on the head with cannot happen. Not you didn't say would not happen. You didn't put like a normative thing into it, because you literally need to design incorruptibility into the system, and now with these network states that becomes possible. So a project that I'm working on is called MSAys, and it's a project that helps people incorporate companies in special economic zones.
Yes.
And they do so by chatting to a GPT-style interface. So, you know, you talk to this thing, you say, oh, I'm a German citizen, I live half the year in, let's say, you know, Thailand or whatever, and you explain your situation, and the GPT agent says, okay, cool, this, and this might be a good jurisdiction to set yourself up. And, you know, AI does that already, fine. But this is the thing, this is the part that I think is important. What my project does is, you give that AI agent your documents, and through zero-knowledge proof and through encryption, all this other stuff, it arrives in the government's database. The government never gets to see it. They just get a zero-knowledge proof of that ID, of the proof of address, of all the other things that they ask for. They get proof that that's valid. They incorporate a company for you, right? And then you get your bank account, you do all that stuff. But, and this is, I think, the key thing, if you're married to just one jurisdiction, that's a political risk.
Yes.
And we can't have that. But here's the thing, once that zero-knowledge proof company is opened, that ownership profile, so the passport, the proof of address, all this other stuff that you needed to open up the company, all of that is saved as a zero-knowledge proof, and you can instantly go to other jurisdictions and open up a company the same way. I think this is one of the tools that will eventually go into a network state that does something properly. Like, this is just a project that I'm working on, it takes up most of my time, and this is one of, you know, hundreds and thousands of things that a network state needs to do.
Yes.
So when somebody asks me what are things that a network state needs to do, there's just so many. I just happen to be experienced with company formation and corporate registries, but you know.
But it totally makes sense what you were saying. So I am the advisor for the Nomad Residence Program. And basically, when you apply and you want to get this residence permit and access to the Schengen area, you need to strip naked in front of the government. So even if there's an American person, you need to basically show everything, the pay slips and really ridiculous stuff. The government, and I'm not saying this now in the name of being the ambassador, actually they should not see this, you know? It's too critical. At the same time, they want to make sure that they get proper people, no criminals, people who behave properly, you know? So it's a scaling issue also for them. They are also sitting on a problem. And if a third entity would come in and say, hey, I can make sure that those people are proper people, you know, I think it would be super powerful, because they are lacking marketing.
Yes.
So I think there's a correlation between company formation and getting access to the territory.
Absolutely.
And then also when it comes to special economic zones, I mean, they are also temporary, you know? I mean, they can exist for 100 years, but at one point they will fade into... Also, I think once we reach a critical mass and we have too much success, those special economic zones, let's say we would have one in Malta, would be attacked, would be shut down.
100%. So we need to be playing a game of realpolitik when it comes to this stuff. We can't just pretend that we're gonna hack our way out of this, you know, Silicon Valley startup style, out of my garage, etc. No, this is a serious game played by serious people, and if you try to, let's say, take away tax revenue from Germany, if you're just like Staatenlos is, if you're just advising people on how to do extremely legal things, and you know, we've essentially got what, 1,000 clients, maybe 1,500. Germany doesn't care about that. But if you start building an actual city and people flee en masse and they go there, and my example for this was Venice in the 600s, you know, 400s, 500s, when everybody was fleeing Rome and going to Venice. And then what did Venice have to do? Venice had to create its economic engine. It had to create something that would generate lots of money, and at that point it was mostly ferrying products from the Lebanese coast, etc., into Europe. And what did they do with this money? They built a fleet. The first thing they did was they built a military fleet. And I'm not advising the Silicon Valley guys to start building weapons or anything like that, but we need to realize the political reality that government technology is always downstream of military technology. And I'll give an example. When all you've got is a Bronze Age chariot and a guy throwing spears, then the type of government that you can build is something like the Akkadian Empire, which wasn't really an empire. It was just a gang of guys in a chariot demanding tribute from city to city. Right? And then somebody comes up with a hoplite, like the armored, heavily armored spearmen of Greek fame. And then what you get is the Greek city-state, right? Because now they're able to effectively protect themselves from the chariot. And this goes on through history. There's a constant adjustment of what the military technology is and what the government is that results from that. Eventually you get to, I don't know, the gunpowder period, like Napoleon, and then you've got these massive nation states which need to build, you know, thousands of weapons. They need to build ships. They need to raise an army. They need to clothe everybody, feed everybody, do logistics. And for that, you need a bureaucratic state with specific tax procedures. You need a unified land registry. You need all this other stuff. And now we find ourselves in 2025. We find ourselves at a time where you've got suicide drones, you've got massive hacking attacks, you've got media manipulation, deep fakes, all this other stuff, and all of this is a new generation of warfare. And the weird thing is, we still find ourselves in a government paradigm where we have nation states with flags and anthems and this whole 19th, 18th century thing, which nobody honestly believes anymore. If you ask somebody, I'm Serbian, for example, where are you from? I'm from Belgrade. Right? Nobody thinks about things in a country concept anymore. And the future that I see over the next 25 to 30 years is network states will not be allowed to prosper by existing states, but also existing states will not be able to compete with the next wave of government technology, which I think is, as I mentioned, relying on drones and electronic countermeasures and all this other stuff. It's going to be essentially privately run cities, special economic zone sized cities that will be extremely densely packed. They'll have their own drone manufacturing, they'll have their own server farms, a lot of them will probably have energy generation as well. And the whole thing about these cities is they'll have this ultra-dense core, and then they'll have a protectorate area around this core. And they'll say that, inside of this area, you're protected from suicide drones and ECM and all this other stuff. Because, if you try to nuke it, there's drones right now that can fly next to an intercontinental ballistic missile, and they can force transmit disarm codes into the system.
Wow.
So essentially, we're no longer in the world of the 20th century with only two countries, USSR and USA. Now we're in a multipolar environment, and anybody who ignores that does so at their own peril.
I mean, what I'm always saying is, it's cheesy. We have a network state declaration, basically, and one paragraph is we are coming basically in peace, we are coming in love, we're not asking for permission, and we don't break the laws. So this is really important 100%. For me. We want to build partnerships with existing jurisdictions which are pro-humanity, and they still exist. No? In the end, it's contribution to the GDP. Why would they be against us? At the same time, what you just said, I think the scenario where we have like a lot of nodes, and they are starting to prosper, they are starting to grow, and people move there, because I also think the complexity in our current society will be just grow more and more people cannot handle it anymore. So two options: they go in a Disneyland mentally, or they say, no, I'm a nomad, I'm not mad, I leave. I cannot take that anymore. Right. So I think the idea that we get attacked physically by the old world should be rendered senseless, because if they take one node, we continue to exist.
Of course.
Just like Bitcoin, unfortunately now the old world, they wrapped crypto 1.0 in central bank digital currencies. If you really think it through, basically they outsmarted Satoshi. That's what I really believe, because if you want to cash out, how?
Right.
They will always know if I cash out. And so what I want to say is, I think it's a game, they are opened and we are answering with playing our game. But our game should be focused on the real human need, real human nature, and not trying to hold the shit together before it's, you know, becoming crazy or something. Because I think this is what is happening now with digital IDs. In the worst case, to keep the shit from falling apart. You know?
100%. The way that, like, if I were sitting in the legacy governments that exist now, and I find out about something like network states, the way that I would combat that, and obviously I want to because I want to stay in power, I want to continue doing all this stuff. The purpose of the state is to maintain itself. What I would do is, obviously, I'd institute national central bank digital currency. I'd do obligatory biometrics at every possible, and I'm genuinely curious why during COVID that wasn't implemented, like a national, like an international biometric check. I mean, there are certain regional biometric agreements that countries enter into, but there's not like an international system for that. And if we want to combat that, we can't do it straight up. We can't attack them directly. The way to do it is by having both physical systems and digital systems happening concurrently. So on one end, we'll have people who are lobbying the existing legacy governments for special economic zones, for territorial concessions, and that is a temporary thing that allows the more permanent thing, the AI agents, the digital states, to take hold properly. And the temporary thing that's just pushing back the tide of legacy government, they do so legally. They do so while helping the government. And you know, I'm a Balkan guy, so you probably know where I'm going with this. You literally need to be helping individual people in the government, because that's what it's made of. It's not just a Leviathan system. It is also that, but also there's people who can help you inside of the government if you help them.
Exactly. Yeah. As I said, we come in peace and in cooperation, and there will be enough jurisdictions who understand what we are trying to do. And I mean, just recently, yesterday, the European Union announced that they really implement now the backdoors. They force Trema, Signal, Telegram to have backdoors, even in a one-to-one private encrypted chat. For me, this is 1948 dystopian. You know, we cannot prevent this from happening. So I think we need to build that protection net right now. You know?
So, I mean, obviously we can fight it, right? Anybody can just use a PGP encryption algorithm, etc. But you're always running into the convenience versus security question, right? And it's one of the things that a network state should be able to do. It should be able to guarantee the complete privacy of its citizens, much like if you think about a place like Britain in the 1700s, opening somebody else's mail was a hanging offense, government agent or no.
Still, today, it's like within the first 10 articles of our constitution, that letters cannot be opened by anyone without court order. Even if I send it from Malta to Germany, no one can touch that letter. And it's the highest good of any democracy. How can we X out the constitution? And I mean, you know, it had a history why we had this secrecy of communication, because what happened in the Second World War, you know, and it was there. And I don't know why we are now forgetting about this. And we cannot ask that we stop to implement backdoors into our private communication. So yeah.
Tell me about World War II. Is this the resistance communicating and the government's wanting to?
It was about just that the Nazi state basically intervened into the communications. You know, if you wanted to protect someone Jewish, of course they wanted to see.
Oh, I see what
you
you
know
mean.
those things, or
Right on.
some probably most people inside them disagreed.
Of course.
But they were afraid.
Of course.
So of course, because even the communication, if I write a letter, what should we do? They read those letters. And even in East Germany, where I'm from, they opened the letters. They had government agencies, they opened the letters, read it, and then forwarded it.
Right on.
And this is what we are doing right now. In
Yes.
the most sophisticated jurisdictions in the world, so to say.
And I'm reasonably certain that the tools that we intend to use, the AI, etc., is being used in exactly this way.
So I'm then really afraid if I just communicate freely, maybe just private things, that AI will be used to completely analyze every single communication happening.
Right.
And this for me is absolutely dystopian, because just the fear that I might get in trouble will prevent me from speaking freely.
You will self-censor.
You will self-censor. And that's anyway, I think we can wrap it up. I'm really thrilled, you know, to pick the minds of people who have more knowledge than me, who are smarter than me, and who basically can put their mind in the future, in the year 2035. It was a really high quality what you said. Was fresh input, because I watched all of the network state material, interviews and conferences out there, and this was really fresh input, and really positive that we can do this.
I'm very obliged to you. It's important to have these conversations that are no nonsense, that are actually new. I like to make a division between ChatGPT conversations and generative AI conversations. I don't like to tell people stuff they already know. I don't like to tell people, oh, you know, there's this guy and he's like. I don't like to mention stuff that should be popular knowledge. I like to go for the obscure stuff. I like to completely shock people with new ways of thinking. Not really new facts, because that's something that can be easily done, but just new ways of thinking. And the people listening to this, I think, are very forward-thinking. And if anybody wants to connect with me, probably in the description of this video, we'll have ways to do that. But very obliged to you for having me on this conversation, and I'd love to speak to you some more.
Thank you, Aleksa. Okay? Ciao, see you guys, and more content is coming soon. Ciao, ciao!